Ah, tax reform. It's a phrase that sends shivers down the spines of some and sparks fervent debate amongst, well, pretty much everyone. But just like those begonias, we're going to have to dig into this one. Why? Because, my friends, taxes are the lifeblood of any functioning society. They pay for our roads, our schools, and those delightful public radio pledge drives we all pretend not to enjoy. Jokes aside, the way a nation structures its tax system has a profound impact on its economy, its businesses, and yes, your wallet. Get it wrong, and you risk stifling growth, discouraging investment, and generally throwing a wrench in the works. But get it right, and you might just unlock a treasure trove of economic potential. And then in 2017, along came a piece of legislation that promised to be the most sweeping tax overhaul in decades, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Picture this, it's December 2017, the air is thick with holiday cheer and possibly a hint of eggnog, and Congress is about to pass a massive tax bill. This was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, a hefty piece of legislation that promised to reshape the American economic landscape. Championed by then-President Donald Trump and a Republican-controlled Congress, the act was touted as a Christmas gift to the American people, a surefire way to boost economic growth, create jobs, and put more money back in the pockets of hard-working Americans. The centerpiece of this act, a significant reduction in the corporate tax rate, slashing it from a hefty 35% to a leaner 21%. Critics argued that the act was nothing more than a giveaway to corporations and the wealthy, with little guarantee that any of the promised benefits would actually materialize for the average American. But the proponents of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act remained undeterred. They argued that this time would be different, that the sheer scale of the corporate tax cut would unleash a wave of investment and economic activity that would silence even the most ardent critics. Would the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act deliver on its promises of growth and prosperity? Only time would tell. Right then, let's talk numbers, shall we? Because when it comes to taxes, it always boils down to the bottom line. Before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act waltzed onto the scene, American corporations faced a statutory corporate tax rate of 35%. The 2017 Act took a pair of rusty shears to that 35%, chopping it down to a more manageable 21%. Proponents of the cut argued that this would make American businesses more competitive on the global stage. The corporate tax cut was the cornerstone of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the shining beacon meant to attract investment, boost growth, and unleash a torrent of economic prosperity. The logic behind the corporate tax cut was fairly straightforward. It was all about making America a more attractive place to do business, like a freshly painted storefront with a grand opening banner strung across the front. The idea was that by lowering the corporate tax rate, businesses would have more money to invest in their operations, expand their workforce, and generally contribute to a more robust economy. Think of it as a game of economic chess, with the tax cut as a strategic move to outmaneuver the competition. Lower taxes were also meant to lure foreign investment, enticing international companies to set up shop on American soil. It was a classic case of build it and they will come, but instead of a baseball field, we were building a tax haven. How did the United States stack up against other developed nations when it came to corporate tax rates? Well, before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the US had one of the highest corporate tax rates in the developed world. The 2017 tax cuts brought the US more in line with the global average, making it a bit more presentable at that economic soiree. However, many other developed nations also offer a variety of tax breaks and incentives to attract businesses, so it's not just about the headline corporate tax rate. The global business landscape is a complex web of factors, and tax rates are just one piece of the puzzle. One of the more intriguing aspects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was its attempt to address the issue of corporate profit shifting. Many American multinational corporations had stashed trillions of dollars in profits overseas, taking advantage of lower tax rates in other countries. The act included a one-time repatriation tax on these overseas profits, offering a lower tax rate to entice companies to bring that money back to the US. The hope was that this influx of capital would lead to a surge in domestic investment. But whether that parade would actually materialize, or if it would just be a few stragglers with empty pockets, remained to be seen. While a lower tax bill might sound like a siren song to any business owner, the reality of investment decisions is a bit more complicated. Businesses don't just invest because they have extra cash lying around. They invest when they see a genuine opportunity for growth and expansion. A tax cut might be a cherry on top, but it's not the whole cake. A tax break, like a sale, can incentivize but not entirely dictate behavior. Let's not forget that corporations have other priorities for their money besides investing in new projects. They might choose to increase dividends to shareholders, a surefire way to keep those investors happy. They could opt for stock buybacks, boosting their share price and pleasing Wall Street. Or they might simply choose to hoard their cash, waiting for a more opportune moment to invest. Corporations have the freedom to use their newfound savings as they see fit, and those choices don't always align with the hopes and dreams of policymakers. Another crucial element in the investment equation is business confidence. Even with a lower tax burden, businesses need to feel confident about the future before they're willing to make significant investments. They need to believe that the economy is strong, that demand for their products or services is growing, and that the political landscape is stable. Uncertainty is the enemy of investment, and a tax cut alone might not be enough to dispel the fog of doubt. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a gamble on the part of its proponents, a bet that businesses would respond to lower taxes with a surge of investment and economic activity. At the heart of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was the theory of trickle-down economics, the idea that benefits given to businesses and wealthy individuals would eventually trickle down to the rest of the economy. The hope was that lower corporate taxes would lead to higher wages, more jobs, and a surge in consumer spending, ultimately benefiting everyone. However, critics argued that trickle-down economics had a spotty track record at best, often leading to wider income inequality and doing little to boost overall economic growth. They pointed out that corporations might prioritize shareholders and executives over workers, using their tax savings to enrich the already wealthy instead of investing in job creation and wage increases. Would the promised benefits materialize, or would the act simply exacerbate existing inequalities? Only time would tell. Right then, lads and lasses, it's time to don our deerstalker hats, grab our magnifying glasses and channel our inner Sherlock Holmes. We're about to dive into the murky waters of economic data, attempting to decipher the true impact of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Now, analysing the effects of a major tax overhaul is a bit like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube after a pint or two. It's messy, complicated, and there's always a chance you'll end up making things worse. The economy is a complex beast, influenced by a multitude of factors, both domestic and global. Nevertheless, economists have been hard at work crunching numbers, running regressions, and generally trying to make sense of the post-tax cut landscape. Let's start with business investment, shall we? That was, after all, the primary objective of the corporate tax cut, to unleash a tidal wave of investment that would propel the American economy to new heights. Did it work? Well, the answer is a bit like a British weather forecast, cloudy, with a chance of meatballs. Some studies have shown a modest uptick in business investment following the tax cuts, particularly in equipment and software. However, this investment bump appears to have been short-lived, fading faster than a summer romance. Other analyses suggest that the impact on overall investment has been minimal, with many companies choosing to use their tax windfall for other purposes, such as share buybacks and dividends. Is the wage puzzle a trickle or a drip? Now, what about wages? Did the promised trickle-down effect materialise, showering ordinary workers with higher paychecks? The results are about as clear as a London fog. Some workers saw modest wage gains, but overall the impact has been decent. But we must remember that the best results are measured over a significant amount of time. The trickle-down effect seems more of a slow drip than a refreshing downpour. However, optimal results of this don't happen overnight. Corporate profits soared, but wages remained stagnant for many workers. It makes one wonder if the trickle-down theory is more of a fairy tale than reality. Was the deficit dilemma a fiscal hangover? Let's dive in. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was projected to add trillions to the national debt. It's like throwing a lavish party on credit fun at the time, but the bill always comes due. When the deficit balloons due to tax cuts for the wealthy, it raises concerns about fiscal sustainability. The debate over taxes, spending, and the role of government in the economy is far from over. But with the addition of this Tax Cut Act, we're at least taking the necessary steps in the right direction. Well, here we are at the end of our journey through the labyrinthine world of tax reform, specifically the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. We've explored the ins and outs of the corporate tax cut, dissected the logic behind it, and examined the real-world outcomes, or at least as much as one can discern from the often conflicting economic data. The Act, like a hefty Christmas pudding, was a mixed bag of sweet promises and potential indigestion. Its proponents touted it as a surefire recipe for economic growth, a magic elixir that would boost investment, create jobs, and fatten the wallets of hard-working Americans. Critics, on the other hand, warned of a sugar rush followed by a nasty fiscal hangover, arguing that the Act would primarily benefit corporations and the wealthy, leaving everyone else with crumbs. So, who was right? Well, as is often the case in economics, the answer is frustratingly nuanced. There's no clear-cut winner or loser, no definitive verdict on whether the Act was a resounding success or an abject failure. On the one hand, the American economy did experience solid growth following the tax cuts. Unemployment fell to historic lows, and the stock market reached record highs. However, the promised surge in business investment never fully materialized. Many companies used their tax windfall for share buybacks and dividends. The federal deficit ballooned, adding trillions to the national debt. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act's impact varied widely depending on who you ask. So, where do we go from here? The debate over taxes, spending, and the role of government in the economy is as old as the Republic itself, and it's not going away anytime soon. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was just one chapter in this ongoing saga, a chapter with a somewhat ambiguous ending. As we move forward, it's essential to learn from the past, to carefully analyze the successes and shortcomings of previous tax reforms. We need to have a clear understanding of our goals. Do we want to spur economic growth, reduce inequality, simplify the tax code? And then craft policies that are carefully designed to achieve those objectives. Tax reform is not a one-size-fits-all endeavour. It requires a nuanced approach, one that takes into account the complexities of the modern economy and the needs of all stakeholders. It's about finding a balance between incentivizing investment and ensuring fairness, between promoting economic growth and maintaining fiscal responsibility. Perhaps most importantly, we need to move beyond the simplistic slogans and partisan rhetoric that often dominate the tax debate. We need to engage in a thoughtful, evidence-based dialogue about how best to structure our tax system to benefit all Americans. Tax policy is not a spectator sport. It affects every single one of us, shaping the economy we live in and the opportunities available to ourselves and future generations. It's time to demand more from our policymakers, to insist on transparency, accountability, and a commitment to finding common ground. The future of tax reform, much like the economy itself, is not preordained. It's a work in progress, shaped by the choices we make and the conversations we have. Let's make sure those choices are informed, those conversations are productive, and the outcome is a tax system that works for everyone. After all, as Winston Churchill once said, we contend that for a nation to try to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle. Wise words indeed, old boy, wise words indeed. If you found this video informative, show us your support by giving us a like and subscribing to our channel. Be sure to do lots of research before taking to the polls. Stay up to date with all of our latest content by also clicking the notification bell. Thanks for watching.